India is a very important market to start having hopefully more and more exports over there from our surplus. Can't underestimate how important that can be to the ag market.
Vietnam's corn import demand is estimated to be nearly 12 million metric tons. Even partially meeting that demand could be a huge opportunity for American corn growers.
Hello and welcome to the Cobcast, Inside the Grind with the National Corn Growers Association. This is where leaders, growers, and stakeholders in the corn industry can turn for big-picture conversations about the state of the industry and its future. From the fields of the Corn Belt to the D.C. Beltway, we're making sure the growers who feed America have a say in the issues that are important to them, with key leaders who are shaping the future of agriculture. So make sure you're following this show in your favorite podcast app and sign up for the National Corn Growers Association newsletter at ncga.com. I'm Dusty Weiss, and today we're going to be talking about trade, because without someone to buy our crops, we are really just digging in the dirt here as growers. But trade is a topic that has been on everyone's mind since President Trump was sworn into office earlier this year. Certainly tariffs have played a large part in that, but today we are going to be talking about a slightly different, however somewhat related topic, and that is the fact that the Trump administration is working hard to open new markets to U.S. corn exports. As for instance, the recent rollout of a new trade agreement with the United Kingdom was a nice piece of good news in the American countryside, where farmers have been frustrated by the fact that the United States has not brokered a trade agreement with a new country since, get this, the year 2012. I'm pretty sure that was pre-Harlem Shake. Of course, there have been updated trade agreements like USMCA signed in recent years, but incredibly, the U.S. has not inked a formal deal with a new country since 2012. So what are some of the possible destinations for corn exports? What could potential deals look like with these new countries, and what does it all mean for those of us who are just getting a crop in the ground right now? Well, we are joined today by two experts who work on this issue. Nancy Martinez is the Director of Public Policy, Trade, and Biotechnology at the National Corn Growers Association, and Andrew Brandt is the Director of Trade Policy at the U.S. Grains Council. Nancy and Andrew, welcome back to the Cobcast.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, good to be back, Dusty. I'm proud to be back. That means I didn't mess it up the first time.
Repeat guests, that's what you want. That kind of stability is what we're all after in the year 2025 here, certainly. When we all got together about a year ago, we were talking about the export of GM corn to Mexico and the big dispute over that. Now, it suffices to say that a lot about the world of international trade has changed over the last year. So, Nancy, can you kick us off by telling us a little bit about the state of play as the Trump administration is making these inroads with other countries as trading partners?
Yes, absolutely. And there's been a flurry of activity ever since Inauguration Day back on January 20th. And as you mentioned before, it's been a long time since the U.S. has brokered one of these formal free trade agreements with a new country. But this new administration is showing a real appetite to get in the weeds and do some hard work in negotiating with countries. This is obviously spurred by the recent tariff announcements, and the Trump administration is claiming that they have over 20 countries who've made offers and are currently negotiating with all of these countries on a bilateral basis. The Trump administration prefers to do these trade discussions, negotiations, whatever you want to call them, on a bilateral basis, so just the U.S. and one other country. The Trump administration wants to do this all within executive authority, so not involve Congress. There's obviously pros and cons to that strategy, but it obviously gives the Trump administration some latitude to really progress things and move at a rapid pace on a bilateral basis. So we're encouraged by this activity. Obviously, bilateral trade agreements or trade deals can do a lot of good for the corn industry. The recent news with the United Kingdom is a really good step in the right direction, especially for ethanol exports. So we're hoping more to come with the UK and all these other countries.
Nancy, you mentioned some of the pros and cons of having these trade deals take place under executive authority. I was wondering if there are also pros and cons of having these deals be bilateral, as you mentioned, as opposed to, in the case of USMCA, a trilateral agreement. Do these sorts of deals, do they go faster when there's only two parties at the negotiating table?
Absolutely. So when there's only the U.S. and one other country, you don't have influences from another party that could potentially hold up the agreement. So it makes things come together at a more rapid pace. But obviously, it could also lead to some duplicative nature as well. So if you do a more multilateral approach, you can kind of tackle some issues on a broader basis, but that obviously takes a lot more time.
So, Andrew, when we're talking about the new markets that the Trump administration is exploring, which countries are we talking about?
Several. Well, Nancy mentioned there's 20 countries negotiating, but there's 60 total countries caught up in the higher reciprocal tariff here that's kind of brought the countries to the table. Two that kind of float to the top or that catch our eyes as we're looking at export markets are certainly India and then Vietnam. Vietnam, we do have a little bit of a footprint in, but India would be the new bell at the ball. They might say, over 1 billion people, very large economy, growing middle class. So that is the country with the most probably to gain. And also, as far as, kind of the conversations around these negotiations, perhaps the country that the Trump administration has kind of signaled they are going for the biggest deal with. Negotiations are still in their infancy, but a lot of people are very hopeful with regard to a new, as Nancy correctly said, executive trade agreement with India.
So when we talk about doing a trade agreement, now Vietnam and India are both countries that the U.S. does have some degree of trade with. So Nancy, when we're talking about brokering these deals, then what specifically are we talking about? Is this about lowering tariffs, breaking down other trade barriers, and more specifically, why aren't these places buying U.S. corn right now?
So for India, it's much more than just the tariff that has prevented access for corn growers. They have these really draconian restrictions on biotechnology, which prevents access for corn into that market. In the US, over 94% of the corn grown is genetically modified in some way, and that helps the corn to be more resilient, to fight off pests, so all these advantages that farmers need. So because of India's restrictions on biotech, corn can't be imported at all. So there's real opportunity we see for DDGs, yellow corn, and also ethanol into India. Right now, we are able to import ethanol into India, but only for industrial use, not for fuel use. So we're really looking for the Trump administration to look beyond tariffs and tackle some of these other barriers, which we know that they are open to. But it'll be, a lot of work to make sure that the Indian regulators understand what the science that we use is in order to make the determination of approval in the US. Just to talk a little bit about India's own domestic industries, the corn that we would potentially be importing into India would not disrupt their domestic industries. They recently expanded ethanol production capacity, so they don't produce enough corn to meet the needs of their own ethanol production. So our corn that we would potentially be able to import into India would help them meet their own production needs without disrupting those farmers in India.
It's kind of wild that we're coming right back. A year ago, we had this conversation about the USMCA and GM corn then, and here we are back on this GMO thing again. This was the issue at the heart of that trade dispute with Mexico. The fact that they didn't understand or chose to ignore the fact that GMO corn is perfectly safe and they wanted to restrict its import. Now, NCGA won that trade dispute case in resounding fashion. We're talking about scoreboard of like 38-0 at the end of the fourth quarter here. A direct quote from the dispute settlement panel was, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong here, that Mexico's measures were, quote, not based on science. To what degree is that case easing the concerns of other potential trading partners and helping to open up these new markets for U.S. corn?
So I think in the Mexico case, Mexico was accepting GM corn without a problem and then put this regulation on the books. So there was definitely a backtracking. With the India market, they have not allowed biotech corn in before. They do have a biotech approved product that they grow in India, cotton, but they have never let in other commodities. So I think we're a bit starting from the beginning in India, but because of India's changing domestic industries, with the ethanol production, with their very large dairy herd, the largest in the world, the dynamics are so that they actually need to figure out a way to address the needs of their own economy. And American corn growers are very poised to help them fill that.
Certainly a lot of economic benefits for India, but also benefits for our growers right here at home of entering into these new agreements with these countries. What would be the economic benefit for the United States, starting with India, for example, Andrew?
Sure. Well, Nancy just did a good job showcasing some of the various products we could start shipping them. Economic estimations, there's always room for error there, but one of the ones we've seen is somewhere around $750 million in the first year if we could get India opened up. And certainly if we could knock down more of the barriers like the GM corn barrier, that number could go up. They've got 1.3 billion people, not often talked about, but a lot of kind of the world population estimates put India as now the largest country in the world and, still growing. So there are a lot of mouths to feed there if they're going to, transition their fuel system to E30. That's a lot of ethanol to clean up their air. So the opportunity here is very large. It would be a good shot in the first year, but the long-term opportunity there as we look towards the end of this decade is equally important, especially when you consider the growing trendline yield here in the US. So India is a very important market. The numbers in the near term, expectation numbers are very, very good, but it's also just getting it opened up, building those relationships to start having hopefully more and more exports over there from our surplus. Can't underestimate how important that can be to the ag market here in the US.
Yeah, absolutely. A huge potential benefit there. There's definitely not 1.3 billion people in Vietnam, but what about the potential economic impact from opening up a deal there, Nancy?
Yeah, absolutely. So Vietnam's corn import demand is estimated to be nearly 12 million metric tons for market year 25-26. So that is a very, very sizable amount. Even partially meeting that demand could be a huge opportunity for American corn growers. Vietnam is the largest consumer of yellow corn within that Southeast Asia region on the import side. So because they import nearly all of that from Brazil, there's no reason why the U.S. can't step up and fill a portion of that demand. Vietnam actually did reduce their tariff on ethanol, dropping that from 10 to 5%. So there's also an opportunity there.
I mean, from where we're sitting right now, obviously we want to export more corn, but both of these seem like pretty big no-brainers. What are some potential hurdles that we might have to overcome to make this happen?
I mean, there's always any number of hurdles you can see. A lot of these hurdles we get to, there's just the tariff barriers. We've talked about them, the non-tariff barriers, but there's also the ongoing business relationships where like they've been dealing with Brazil. They've kind of become accustomed. It's kind of, I would describe it in a very loose way, kind of like you're used to going to your gas station in your hometown and that's just the one that works for you. So a new one comes along. What kind of incentive do they have to throw at you to get you to change? So there's relationships there, but I do think they're both growing economies. There certainly is an opportunity. We actually have a little bit different corn than Brazil. Brazil has kind of a very hard, I learned this since coming to the council. I didn't know there were two types of corn in the world. I thought it was just all number 2 yellow den corn. But Brazil has what's known as fleck corn, which is actually like, it's more of a round kernel. It's very, very hard on the outside. Now it's pretty, but ours actually mills a little better. We have a higher starch content, which we would argue is what they're really buying the corn for. So we think we are very, very competitive with our product to go into those markets, whether it be for feed or ethanol, what have you. So it's a lot of tariffs. It's some, like a biotech ban is obviously a huge hurdle, but then there's also kind of the relationships that you have to go in and build, and you have to be a reliable supplier. So there are challenges like that, but certainly there's nothing that is insurmountable. We just want the chance to kind of on the policy side, get the playing field leveled so then our grain companies can go in there and do what they do.
Yeah, it sounds like aside from the whole GMO thing, the biggest barrier that we face is inertia, yeah?
Yeah, I think just getting the door open for us so we can go and compete.
And I would also add, countries are trying to diversify their own supply chain, so they're not just relying on one sole supplier. So the U.S. can definitely be part of that overall equation and help countries kind of spread their risk around.
So, Nancy, obviously this is an issue of great interest to the National Corn Growers Association. So what are you all doing at NCGA headquarters and out in D.C. to help ensure that these agreements happen, to get them over the finish line?
Yeah, absolutely. We are closely working with the Trump administration, with USTR Ambassador Jameson Greer, with Secretary Rollins over at USDA. We are doing public efforts. We recently just did a press conference talking through about the benefits of India. And we also have, our chief economist and our board president talking about a lot of these opportunities and kind of soliciting various feedback about how we can better obtain market access. Obviously, we just want our issues to be top of mind for administration officials when they're going in with a variety of different countries, hundreds of thousands of requests from industries, manufacturers, people all across the United States. We just want them to have corn top of mind.
Andrew, you did a really good job laying out sort of the institutional inertia that we face in getting this deal done and how it's really important to be seen as a reliable trading partner and all of these things that really just take time and trust. So my next question feels kind of dumb, but how quick can we get this done? Can we talk about timing a little bit? How soon could we see a deal happen?
Great question. I think there's a lot of people around DC debating this. So if you look at like a more traditional trade agreement, those usually take years and or a decade, like in the case of TPP. The Trump administration, and I can't stress this enough, is using the exact opposite approach of that. They're going very fast. So going back to the launch of the reciprocal tariffs in April, then the pausing, there's a 90-day negotiating window with these 60 countries that these 20 countries who have already put offers on the table. This 90-day window wraps up, I believe, just after the 4th of July, I believe July 6th or 7th, sometime in there. So that is the goal of the Trump administration, to get these executive trade agreements wrapped up by, which is I dare say, the most aggressive negotiating schedule in the history of worldwide trade negotiations. It's a very aggressive pace. Will they all be done? We will wait and see. We know that they've already got 20 offers on the table, so they're working through details. And then India could potentially take a little longer, but who knows? Maybe it'll move fast. I mean, the Trump administration, I've been in DC a while now, and typically DC is seen as a slow policy town. That is not the case right now. Things are moving very fast. So we will see where we end up. Check back in after the 4th of July, I guess.
Certainly, I know a lot of growers who would love to see something get done this summer yet even. So, Nancy, what can we do to help get this thing over the finish line, to help with this process?
Yeah, so anybody interested in either learning more or trying to figure out how to help us participate in all these market access outreach efforts, go to our website, www.ncga.com. You can click on the news section to read more about what we're doing, and then go to the Action Center to sign up for any alerts. So this will help anybody who's interested to participate in outreach on this, but also other important issues affecting corn growers.
Certainly the voice of the grower, always a strong one, always carries a lot of weight in DC. And if there's anything that we can do to contribute to helping get this thing moving, I think it's a worthwhile endeavor. Andrew, you said a while back a word that I've heard a lot lately. In fact, I'd put it as a strong front runner for word of the year for 2025, and that's the word uncertainty. But it is kind of that time of year right now when growers wish things were a little bit more certain. They're getting their fields planted. Maybe they're looking at the contracts on offer and trying to decide, is this the best price that I can get this year? So for growers who have been frustrated by the price of corn, what do they need to know about what the next few months and the year ahead might hold?
Thanks for the easy question. I think as you look at, farmers are hopeful people. We go out and plant every year. I grew up on a farm in Missouri. The planted acres stay pretty similar, even though there are years where you go out there and there's a lot of uncertainty with, what the price is, and you're hoping for things to swing by harvest, even though there's typically a harvest low. And then, you get into the winter months and store your grain and then sell it. I think the president has said it himself. You got to be patient. We hope this will open up new market opportunities, but this is kind of a new reconfiguring of the globalized world a lot of us have known the last couple decades. So I think farmers should be hopeful, take opportunities. We certainly can say the Trump administration is working very hard to open up new opportunities. Until we get the details of that, I don't want to overpromise here, but I do think there's a lot of effort to push trade in the right direction for farmers who are out there planting today. So they're just going to have to do what they always do, which is remain hopeful and go grow a good crop, take advantage of market rallies if and when they come, and we'll see where the policy stuff shakes out. Because when you're on your tractor, you do feel kind of detached, borrowing a bunch of money or, risking a lot of money to put this crop in. And I sure hope sure hope the market's there by harvest time or in next year, because this is my livelihood. So it is a stressful thing to do. We're just going to have to wait, be patient, and hope these things come through. And I think based on the effort I'm seeing, if things don't go right, it's not going to be because of a lack of effort.
Nancy, I'm going to give you a last word on this. Anything to add there?
Well, I think Andrew summed it up great. I think we are, yes, in a period where it's difficult to predict what's going to happen with all of these markets, with all of these countries coming to the table. I think what hasn't changed, though, is the quality and the stability of the American farmer and the crops that we produce, right, on the corn side. And I think that's what we definitely have in our advantage. When farmers are planting right now, yes, we've got a period before harvest, but you can definitely rely on your folks at NCGA, at Grains Council, to do the heavy work and relaying concerns to the administration and positive feedback as well. So that's our job, and we'll continue to do that.
Well, that's certainly another thing that hasn't changed is growers still have folks like you two working on their behalf in DC and around the world trying to get these deals done as well. They can take comfort knowing that hopefully we're going to get this thing over the finish line. Hopefully we'll have some new markets opened up, and we really appreciate the two of you taking time to catch us up on all of this and getting us up to speed. Nancy Martinez, Director of Public Policy, Trade, and Biotechnology at the National Corn Growers Association, and Andrew Brandt, Director of Trade Policy at the U.S. Grains Council. Thank you both for joining us here on the Cobcast.
Thank you, Dusty.
Thank you.
And thank you for listening. We hope that you'll join us again next month for another episode of the Cobcast, Inside the Grind with the National Corn Growers Association. If you are on X, you can follow at National Corn for more news and updates from NCGA. Visit ncga.com to sign up for the association's email newsletter and make sure you're following this show in your favorite podcast app. The Cobcast is brought to you by the National Corn Growers Association, with editing by Matt Covarrubias, and it's produced by PodCamp Media, branded podcast production for businesses, podcampmedia.com. For the National Corn Growers Association, thanks for listening. I'm Dusty Weiss.